I don't know anyone that can grease their machine and not have it all over them by the end of it. I'm gonna grab my DeWalt and see if it'll put grease into this. The angle of the dangle made it too much of a little bit of a bind. I guess the only thing I probably dislike the most out of it. Hey everyone, Mike here, Rust Garage and Homestead. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do some greasing on Tiny, and I'm going to be switching over to a different grease. I'm not going to be using the Lucas Red and Tacky anymore. We'll talk about what I'm using and why here in just a bit. And the second part of that is I got a new grease gun that we're going to try out, and we're going to use this grease gun just for Tiny. Let's check out the new grease gun we got. Okay, you guys can see this is a grease gun sent to us. This is sent to us from Seesii. I've got the 20 volt DeWalt that I use for pretty much everything, the large ag tractors, the other tractors, whatever implements we need to grease. But I think this grease gun, we're gonna put the new grease that I'm wanting to use in Tiny in this, and we'll just dedicate this grease gun to Tiny and see how it does. Now this grease gun you can pick up on Amazon. It is about half price of what the DeWalts are. This grease gun currently, I believe, is at $119 on Amazon. I'll leave links to this product down in the description if you're interested. But let's open this thing up and see what comes with it. Okay, you got your user manual. You've got, I see a lot of these grease guns come with these little gloves. I don't know. I don't use them. I don't really see the need in them. I usually don't use gloves whenever I'm greasing. If I do, I'm going to use some sort of latex or a nitrile style glove, but I'm sure somebody can get some use out of those. It comes with your hose. It does have its own I didn't buy a lock and lube because whenever I was looking at this product, I seen it came with its own style of lock and lube. So we're going to use this and see how this goes also. It looks okay. We'll see how it works. If it doesn't end up working, we'll probably end up putting a lock and lube on this, but I have high hopes for this one that this one will work out just fine. It does come with two amp hour 21 volt batteries. I've got one on the charger. This one I've already charged, and it comes with some different fittings. So if you didn't want to use the hose and you wanted more of a hard pipe like some grease guns have, you've got a hard pipe for it. You've got an Allen wrench. You've got this other grease gun coupling that'll hook onto this tube like so. And then you have where you can put this needle style grease tip. Certain things use this kind of grease needle. Different wheel bearings, this makes it a lot easier than the old way of I used to pack wheel bearings by putting a bunch of grease in your hand and running the bearing back over it a bunch of times. You can fill up a wheel bearing pretty easy with one of those. And if you've got the right oil, you could probably use this on your chainsaw bar. Some of your chainsaw bars have greasable roller tips. That would probably work on that as well. And then you've got the grease gun. It does come with a carrying strap. You can use it in the normal configuration with everything being straight, or you can rotate this. This does have a rotatable handle. It's got a little push button right up here on it, and you can rotate that thing around and it'll sit like a pistol grip. Now it's sitting up just fine. Let's see if it makes any difference putting the battery in it. And it doesn't, and we'll check that again once we have a full tube of grease in it. But it does come with a LED work light on the front of it. You've got your vent for your cartridge. This unscrews so you can put your cartridge in it. So yeah, looking forward to trying this thing out and seeing how well it works. For half the price of the DeWalt, that's quite a bit. The DeWalt one is double the price, and it doesn't come with all these extra pieces and 2 batteries and a lock and lube. So this comes with quite a bit of things. It is a lithium battery. Both these batteries are lithium batteries. So let me go get my new grease. We'll talk about it for just a second. We'll get this thing filled up in here. We need to get the hose put on and our coupling. Guess we can go ahead and do that now before we fill it up with grease. So this new coupling, instead of the one lever like what comes on the lock and lube, this does have 2. Push it down, all these spread out. It's all metal, got a rubber seal, looks like right up in the tip. I think it'll work out just fine. We'll see. If it doesn't, I'll let y'all know. This grease gun is a 12,000 PSI rated grease gun, so that should help quite a bit if you've got some dirtier fittings, even though you guys should be cleaning off your grease zerks before you put grease into them. Or if you've got an implement that you probably haven't greased as much as you should, sometimes some things get packed up in there and things become a little bit tight. So you need to have quite a bit of pressure to push some of that stuff out. But let me look through the owner's manual real quick, read through, see if there's anything else I'm missing on this, and we'll be back. Okay, so I am seeing on the Seesii grease gun, if you look on Amazon and you look, it's on all sorts of things in here and on the label on the side of it. This does say maximum of 12,000 PSI. But looking at the owner's manual, it is set to 7,000 PSI is where the relief valve is set. If you want to adjust it, there's a little Allen headed bolt right up under here That's what your little short Allen wrench is for, is to adjust that pressure if you need to increase it for any reason. For the most part, 7,000 PSI should be just fine, as long as you don't have anything plugged up, like I said. So this owner's manual does have about a dozen different languages in it, not just English. So, okay, let's go ahead and get the hose hooked up here under this cover, and then we'll get the lock and lube hooked up to the other end of the hose. It is showing all of these fittings to be 1/8 inch pipe, national pipe thread. Let's go ahead and get these put in, and let me figure out what wrench size this is, and I'll be back. Okay, so it looks like you need a 13 millimeter, 14 millimeter, and a 16 millimeter to put this together. This fitting up here, that's where your 16 millimeter goes. The hose, that is all a 13 millimeter. And then your lock and lube is going to be a 14 millimeter. So let's go ahead and get this put together. Let me go ahead and straighten this handle out, because I think it's going to help to be straight. And I'm just going to use this wrench so I don't mess anything up. Pretty snug. Okay, next we'll put the lock and lube, or I don't guess it's actually a lock and lube, that is a specific brand, but this is their locking grease tip. We'll get put on here. Let's go ahead and lay this down so I don't knock it over. But I'll keep y'all updated how this grease gun is doing as we use it. I'm pretty consistent on greasing Tiny, so we'll see. Hopefully it holds up. I've got high hopes for it. If it does or doesn't, you guys will know. Okay, well, the grease gun's put together. This is the new grease I'm going to be using. This is a Valvoline Moly grease, fortified grease. It is gray, black is what it looks like to me. But when I used to work on heavy equipment all the time, we used a Moly-based grease on our dozers and our excavators and loaders and everything like that. I always had really good luck with that grease. So I wanted to go back and start using some of that grease in this equipment just because I know it works fine and it's about the same price as what I found to the Red and Tacky Lucas. Now, I've used a lot of the Red and Tacky Lucas. I think it works great. I've had zero issues with that as well. I do like it on Tiny because it's red and it kind of matches the paint of that machine. So when you get a little carried away greasing like I do sometimes, the grease kind of matches the paint. This will definitely stick out a lot more. But is there a particular grease that you guys recommend that you guys use on your equipment? Is it a Moly grease? Is it just a regular cheap whatever grease, or Red and Tacky? Leave a comment, let me know. Okay, now I'm putting this tube in. This is the exhaust port is what they call it. To me, that's your vent. That's where you get all the air out of this. So let's go ahead and put this grease up in there. Slide this straight down. Now, you've got a metal end and then a end that has a cap on it. You always want to put the cap end down towards the plunger because there's a wiper on this plunger that helps push this grease up through the tube, and it doesn't really fit through the metal ring part itself. So the metal ring always goes up towards the gun itself. So that's in. Let's get this thing screwed on and let's get it bled out. I'm just going to look real quick, make sure there's nothing specific with this one. Normally on the DeWalt, you release it up here and this plunger will go in. You leave the vent open and let it bleed itself. So they're saying to rotate the exhaust knob 2 times, loosen it, 1, 2, then press the trigger until the exhaust valve discharges air and a small amount of grease, which means the air has been exhausted. Then tighten the knob back up and you can use the grease gun normally. And if you still can't get grease out, repeat the purge procedure until it comes out. So that's loosened up. Let's go ahead and release our brake. Just like that. Had to push in on it and it said to pump it. We'll go ahead and grab a grease rag before we make a total mess. Okay, we've got a grease rag. The exhaust port is here on this side. There we go. See that grease poking out up in here? Okay, we are getting grease, so the exhaust knob's closed. Let's get this mess wiped up. So one thing about greasing machines, you almost always end up wearing some of it by the time you're done. So it's up to there. It's not up to here yet. But there's something else I was wanting to show you on this case. My DeWalt, it always goes back in the case whenever I'm done with it. So that one is rough to get it to fit just right with the lock and lube and everything in it, because it seems like they just give you enough room on it. But this grease gun, but it'll fit right down here, and it's got two little cutouts on the case for the hose to poke through. So you can hook it up, carry it where you want. Okay, well, now that we got this thing bled, got it put together, let's go give Tiny some grease and get that thing all lubricated. Okay, and one other thing, I know I talked about it briefly. This thing does have a carrying strap on it, and I don't know. I first kind of thought that was gimmicky, but I think a person could get used to that, where you're not having to hold your grease gun all the time. I don't know. I'm gonna give it a try with the strap. This is something else I was wanting to try to see how it sat. It's got grease in it, everything's hooked up. Sits just fine that way. Sits fine that way. And I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but the LED light that it has, that is a 1,000 lumen light. I can see that being beneficial also. Anyways, let's go out to Tiny and let's get this thing greased up. Okay, so Tiny is filthy for sure, but something I like to do before I do grease everything, take a little pocket screwdriver. Used to get these on the Snap-on truck for free, but I take this and I scrape all the dirt and everything else that's packed in around the zert, get it out of there, and just wipe it off with a grease rag. Then if you got any like major dirt, most of this stuff I'm getting out of there is just kind of a sandy, gritty grease just from using the loader. Then I just try to clean off the little ball on the zert itself where the grease goes in, just to reduce any risk of shoving any sand or anything else into that grease zerk. So let me go ahead and go around and clean the rest of the zerks out, and then we'll start greasing this machine. So I did just notice, if you do want to use it in more of a pistol grip format, I don't think you're going to be able to use the carry handle as much, just because it changes the button to both sides and it just kind of puts everything in the wrong place. But all the grease zerks are cleaned up, so let's go ahead. This hose is still empty, so it's going to pump on it for a little while. We're going to head out to this last one here and pump till we get grease coming out. Okay, gotta push it a little harder. There it goes, it's pumping out that red Lucas. That's enough. I grease this thing enough, that red stuff will get pushed out sooner than later. So far, this little lock and lube of theirs is working just fine. I was always told growing up, 3 pumps, that's all you gave it, but I like to see grease being pushed out. That may be a little wasteful, but that's just my preference. So to me, an electric grease gun makes you grease your machine more frequently, because it is a lot easier and less tiring than using a regular hand pump machine. So this grease fitting, you do have to shove on it a lot harder than you do on the lock and lube, but so far, I mean, honestly, it's grabbing hold just fine, and it's working like it should. It's not like it takes an extreme amount of pressure to get it, but it pops right off if you don't get it. You can almost feel it, and it's probably part of the spring being new inside there. It's just a little tougher to push on. Okay, now wipe this grease tip off. Y'all don't forget on these smaller machines, because I'm confident a lot of people do miss it, you've got pivot point grease points down at the bottom. Really need to make sure you keep those greased. Okay, I know it's a little dark, but there's a grease zerk right here, and then there's one on the back side that we're going to want to make sure we get greased. Well, I know I can see just fine. Sure you guys can't, but again, we have that light on here. Just double check, make sure it's all good. Put this on. Okay, there is the one on the back side. Okay, I'd say that one's full. Okay, we're here on the backhoe, and this is kind of some of the stuff I was talking about. This dirt and everything just gets packed up in around all of this. Grease zerk itself gets covered. This one's a little bit more of a pain to get to, but you just want to make sure everything's wiped off good, and the little ball on the end of the zerk is cleaned up just like that, where we're going to be able to get grease in it. All this stuff just takes a second. Wipe it off before you use it, and you ain't got to worry about it. Whoop. Popped off. There we go, it's pumping. This one is a little more of a stretch to get in here. No fault of the grease guns, but grease coming out of there. So while I'm here, go ahead and wipe some of this excessive grease off of everything. This one right in here, this is by far one of the hardest ones to get, just because this polish rod's right in the way. Let's see if this quick connect will fit in there. We got grease coming out, making a mess all on the floor. No, I didn't get this one. There we go. Ooh, that made a little bit of a mess. Get that wiped up too. I don't know anyone that can grease their machine and not have it all over them by the end of it. If you guys can do that, you're pretty talented. Now before you switch greases, like I'm doing, probably not a bad idea to check the owner's manual. Make sure whatever grease you're going with is compatible with what your machine is supposed to have. Guess that thing gets a bunch of built up pressure on it. As soon as you let it go, it keeps drooling a little bit. That's okay. At least it ain't coming out of the zerk itself, needing to be replaced. Okay, get all these cleaned. I didn't go through like I did on the front end and get everything wiped up. Did some of them, but okay. I'm gonna let the pressure settle for just a second. Watch this quit moving, then I'll take it off. So you do have to watch. This is a little bit of a pain, not awful, but you really got to make sure it's pushed up in there. But I imagine a lot of it is that spring in it. And I haven't messed with the pressure regulator on this, so it's still the factory 7,000 PSI. But I'm surprised that a few of these seem like they've either got a good bit of sand or something in them or something, but I'm surprised that they are building up so much pressure to pump grease into them. But it's doing it just fine. I think I'm on my 4th or 5th grease rag right now. I wonder if our tube's getting low. I bet it is. Oh, well, looks like, what happened here? This lock and lube grease zerk looks just fine, but the lock and lube fitting almost came apart. Okay, it's pushed back in there. Let me try this one over here on the swing. If we don't get any grease out of it, we'll go ahead and put in a tube in. We got grease out of it. Okay, got grease on the boom there. Grease on the stick. Got grease in there. I wonder why that one, and I'm making a mess. Wonder why this one wasn't really wanting to take any grease. Let's try the lower swing pivot. I'm curious why these have all of a sudden not wanting to take grease. Okay, the coupling seems to be doing fine. We had that one blowout a minute ago, but I've used it on several others and it worked just fine. I'm gonna grab my DeWalt and see if it'll put grease into this. Okay, here's the DeWalt with the lock and lube. Let's see. It's poking out the relief just like the other one was. let me start this thing, put the bucket down and take some of the pressure off of this, because the DeWalt, it really wasn't wanting to pump it in there either. DeWalt might be out of grease though. Okay, well, let's try it again. Let's go back with the Seesii. Oh yeah, we got grease coming out now. So, having that thing stretched out the way we had it, just had too much pressure binding it up, and it wouldn't allow it to grease. I mean, the DeWalt wouldn't do it, or this one. Just building up way too much pressure and blowing it out the relief. Yeah, you can even hear the motor's not pumping like it was. Oh, that came open. The exhaust port came open on us. That's happened twice now. I think it's just kind of sticking out there by itself. You bump it along the ground, you can get it to open itself. Now let's try it. Yep, got grease coming out. Okay, so that's all that was. It was just kind of the angle of the dangle made it too much of a little bit of a bind. Oh, this grease is going to be everywhere. So I normally like doing this outside, but it's raining right now, and I don't want to grease the machine out in the rain. Okay, well, I'm glad that it wasn't just the Seesii grease gun. The DeWalt didn't do it either, so that makes me happy. A few more and we'll be done. We got the outriggers right up here, this one and that one, and then we will put the outriggers down, and we got 2 on each side down low. Yep, got grease coming out there. Okay. All right, let me start this thing, lower the outriggers, and let's get these last 4 and we'll be done. This is probably the most pain on this machine greasing, is you got to have these outriggers all the way down to get to a couple of these grease zerks. That's a little bit of a pain. This one would benefit from a 90. At some point I'll probably change. Okay, so here you go. You got this one here, which when the outrigger's up, this thing's pointed back off into here, and then you got this one right down here. Get grease coming out just fine. Now let's try this one. This one's a little bit tighter. Let me go ahead, get to the other side. You guys have seen this side. It's gonna be the exact same on the other. Let's go ahead and get that other side greased, then we'll be done. Okay, grease is a pain, but these Tubbo towels, they are real nice for getting all that grease and grime and everything else off your hands. If you guys are interested in them, these Tubbo towels, I'll put a link to them down in the description. They're pretty cheap and they're good. All right, well, honestly, I think it did just fine. We had the one hiccup of that center, that coupling for their locking coupling, where it popped out, but it honestly, it pushed right back in. You guys can see I used it after. And then I guess the only thing I probably dislike the most out of it, because I've done it 3 times, I guess, this exhaust port sticking off the backside here. More than once I've tapped it along the ground or whatever, and it just opens it, and as soon as you go to pump, it starts pushing grease out like crazy. So the location of that, not the hugest fan of. I think if they were going to update something, that would probably be one of the ones. But I think for the money, as the time of this recording, November 24, I want to say it's $119 for this grease gun, which is half of what the DeWalts are, and I think the Milwaukees are even more. But honestly, it did fine. It did a fantastic job. A few little hiccups. I've got some grease zerks that would really benefit from me moving the positions of them, making them 90s or 45s or something. They're locking lube, they're locking style grease tip. That spring on there is pretty tough on some of them. If you've got easy access to the zerk, it's not so bad, but when it's tighter quarters and you've got to try to get it wedged down in on there, that's a little tougher, but it's doable. I greased every grease zerk on this machine with this grease zerk, or with this grease gun, and it did fine. So if you would, leave a comment. Give me your thoughts on how you think the Seesii did for a grease gun. Do you think it's a good affordable option versus some of the big name brands that are double the price? And let me know what kind of grease you guys are running on your machines out there. Anyone else using this moly grease like I am? To me, it's just something we used to use a lot of it. We would, our grease came in a 35-gallon drum, and it had a pneumatic pump on top of it. That's how we greased all our machines, and we went through a lot of those drums of grease. But anyways, guys, if you enjoyed the video, give the video a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks.